All right. I should be live. And if for some reason I'm not, please let me know in the chat. But otherwise, welcome to another live stream where we're discussing the fact that it happens now. There's a lot of different ways things can go here in the next week or so. And you need to be mentally prepared for, well, just about anything. So good to see everybody tonight. Before we get started and everybody starts rolling in, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can come out here, do live streams like this one, give you good information, and point you in the right direction if you need to get better equipped for SHTF purposes. So big thanks to Midway USA. They're awesome, 100%, no lie, no cap. So Hey, USMC Devil Dog 0311. Good to see you. 5x5s are coming in. Vanessa Stoller says 5x5. Gregor Zamina says we're good to go. Everybody is here, and all the names I see and appreciate are saying hello. So it's great to see you all. David Baise. I just like saying that one. It's always a good time. Good to see you guys. Okay, so you can hear me. You can see me. I think we're ready to roll. There's a lot to talk about tonight, but also not a lot to talk about. But we do need to discuss the different outcomes of each of these different stories we're going to go over, because honestly, there's a lot of ways these things can unfold, and there's very little time left for some of these crazy things to happen before the election, which means, well, based on the timeline many of us had and have been working with for quite some time now, we're expecting something to occur before it, which means, well, 8 days is all we have left. So King Nothing 86. Is it getting worse yet before it gets worse? It is getting worse. You're right. It could get better, but for now, still worse. So I appreciate you being here to find out just how worse, okay? Let's get started. Okay, first we're gonna talk a little bit about what can happen here domestically within the next 8 days, especially regarding the current executive branch of the government, okay? So here's a little article that came out October 27th, yesterday, which is talking about how the Harris staff is starting to distance themselves from Joe Biden. Now, I promise this isn't just political. I'm going to explain to you why this is something you should be considering right now, okay? Harris stiff arms Biden. This is from Axios. President Biden wants to campaign for Vice President Harris in the campaign's final 9 days. Harris campaign keeps responding, "We'll get back to you." 3 people familiar with the dynamic tell Axios' Alex Thompson. Why it matters. Harris's team believes Biden is a political liability, but is reluctant to directly say they don't want him to campaign for her. All right. And now everybody's saying that there's a lot of discourse and a lot of argument and everything else happening between the two staffs within the executive branch right now. But there are a few things to also keep in mind here. So Biden's announcement this past week that he would campaign in Pittsburgh yesterday caught many on Harris's team off guard. 2 people familiar with the matter told Axios. He's gone rogue in many ways when it comes to what their ambitions are. Okay, so moving forward from there, some Harris aides were frustrated when Biden told supporters in New Hampshire on Tuesday in reference to Trump, "We got to lock him up." He clarified that, saying he meant, politically. I don't think that's what he meant. We all know that's probably not what he meant, but it did look bad, and it did show that there's a lot of reasons to believe in political persecution as being their number one strategy. So it created a negative aspect of their campaign. Now, here's the reason why this matters, okay? And I know at first glance, it's like, what are you talking about? Why should we care about this at all? It's not about them distancing themselves from him for the campaign. They're distancing, I can't talk tonight, it's fine. They're distancing themselves from him in general. And there could be some reasons for why. And this is something you should definitely be considering. A lot of Arizona people here tonight. Glad to see you all. Thank you so much. I'm in North Dakota, which at least for me, Arizona is to North Dakota as Florida is to New York, or at least that's what it seems like, all right? So why does this matter? Because of the 25th Amendment. And why am I bringing that up? Because there's 8 days left before the election. And it's pretty obvious and clear at this point in time, the Harris campaign is in shambles. They're doing a very bad job. Okay. I mean, it's pretty clear. Social media is not friendly to political campaigns when somebody is not genuine. And it's becoming very clear that that's the case in their situation. So the 25th Amendment is something that could be utilized and leveraged to do the October surprise, the Black Swan event, to get Biden out of the way, to have President Harris now be the person you're voting for, not Vice President, right? And that also creates a power situation where they then have to nominate a vice president. They have to then have that voted on by the House and the Senate and everybody else with the majority. And this creates an entire constitutional crisis. Not to mention, obviously, she comes into the power of the presidency before the transitional period if she were to lose the election. Now, there's actually some reasons why that's not necessarily a benefit to her, but for winning the election, it could be their last-ditch effort, the last trump card that they have, ironically enough. So just to go over this and how that would work, to give you a quick idea, because this is a real concern that you should be considering. Either they're okay with losing, because that's, let's be honest, that's how badly they're doing right now, or they're willing to do anything to win. And I know a lot of you feel that the system is rigged and whoever is going to win has been selected and a million other things, but we can't count on that because your conspiracy about that is just as provable as the fact that we don't have a say, right? Prove either one to me and sure, but we can't. So we have to operate off of what we assume to be the way things work. And right now, that is voting, right? Regardless of how you feel about it, that's the system we currently have. So how could she try to win when she's doing so badly? By becoming president anyway. Oh, you already won. First female president. Here she is. Now, here's how this happens. And this is kind of a layman's explanation of it, okay? But this is from the National Constitution Center, so it made it very easy for us to all understand. Presidential disability and succession. It's very easy to convince just about anyone that Biden probably shouldn't be president based on cognitive decline or whatever else you want to blame it on. And they could easily do this, and here's how. First off, in case of the removal of president from office or his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Okay, so if he's gone, she is president. Section 2, whenever there is a vacancy in the office of vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. So she becomes president, then she has to nominate a vice president that has to be voted on, but that's going to take a long time and probably not going to matter because this isn't the reason why they're doing it, right? So it doesn't even matter who gets in there in a way, but we'll talk about that in a second because it still sort of does. Section 3, now here's where it becomes interesting. When the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits them or to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. So this is letting you know that all they have to do is force Biden to basically write a letter to the pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House and say, hey, I can't do it anymore. I'm sick, or hey, I'm not mentally capable of being president anymore. And the only thing that turns that around is if he writes them another letter in the future saying, never mind, I'm actually fine now. So that's not very hard to do, right? Especially if you have, I don't know, blackmail on somebody. That's not like that exists in our political system at all, especially against the Bidens. So this is honestly something that can happen. And so all they have to do is make him do it. But guess what? There's another avenue to approach here, all right? Whenever the vice president and a majority, this is section 4, by the way, of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. So, in case you're not aware, the principal officers of the executive departments are basically the cabinet members that they have. This includes the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Treasury, all the secretaries, okay? These are people that they could easily convince to remove Biden, especially if they're worried about losing anyway, right? Because what's there to lose? If they're going to lose the White House via Kamala not doing a good job, then why not just try this one last move? And all they have to do is convince people who are currently in the White House that aren't Joe Biden to write a letter basically saying, hey, Joe Biden's not good to do this anymore. And they have to go, okay. So there's a lot of ways this can go down, and it's very easy for them to implement. Now, there is one roadblock in their way from doing this. And what that roadblock is that if a vice president isn't put into office before the transition of power, before the certification of the election, then that goes to Speaker of the House, right? There's a line of secession. The whole thing's weird. I don't want to fully explain it because I don't even fully always understand everything that's happening here, but I try to do my research based on this conversation. So what that would mean is that it would put Mike Johnson into the White House if they can't get the person they have to vote on via the House and the Congress and the Senate, right? They have to vote by a majority to get whoever the president nominates into office. If they can't get them in, or if there's some sort of filibuster or stalemate or whatever, then once certification occurs, and if anything crazy happens and they decide not to certify the results or force Congress to nullify them or whatever else happens, then Speaker of the House becomes the vice president, which means they have a Republican and a Democrat in the White House. That's going to create some problems for them for completing what it is they're trying to do. So that is a thing that's in the way of them doing this, because they know that's a high possibility of that being what occurs if they take this route, and then they take all the power they gain in order to do it, to get rid of the election results from one way or the other, right? They're going, and this is something you should plan for anyway. There's a good chance they're going to try to legally disqualify Trump from being able to be the president if he does win, which means we're going to have a constitutional crisis. And if they do that while Biden's still in office, it might make things easier, because then he gets pushed out the second he's gone. Kamala Harris becomes president, and then they vote on a vice president. But if they do this before to try to win the election and lose, then all that happens anyway, at least in their plans or opinion. And then Mike Johnson becomes the vice president, which, look, I'm not a Mike Johnson guy or anything like that, but that's still problematic for them because they don't have total control at that point. So there's a lot of things here in the works, but you should expect anything at this point in time, because these people are willing to do just about anything, as we've seen over the years. And this is a legal process that they could perfectly achieve. This is a successful thing they could pull off if they decide that's what they have to do. So law of the minimum says, MP, in my opinion, right is peaceful. Left can burn down cities. Government needs chaos to do martial law. Trump will win. Well, I honestly, there's a little bit of everything to everything, right? But from what we've seen in the past, that's generally accurate, in my opinion. However, we don't know for a fact Trump will win. And I will tell you that if he doesn't win, the main reason at this point in time, just even based on campaign performances and things of that nature, right? Like, not just based on personal bias, but anything along those lines, right? Because let's be honest, you guys know me well enough now, right? Like, I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. I think that's pretty obvious. So whatever. But regardless, Trump still needs everyone to go vote for him to win. And unfortunately, conservatives in general tend to be more black-pilled than liberals. And conservatives have lost a lot of faith in the integrity of our systems over the years, feeling that they've been mistreated and that things aren't necessarily genuine and generally rigged against them. So conservatives in general have been disenfranchised from voting due to efforts, mostly propaganda-style efforts from those who are on the other side, to make them feel that there isn't any reason for them to actually go out and vote because it's rigged and everything else. And so I would say, at least in my opinion, the right suffers from that much more than the left, which means if those people don't mobilize to actually go out and try to make it happen, then there's still a chance he loses. Yes, can they cheat and everything else? We'll talk about that here soon, because there's definitely something to be concerned about that. But if you can overwhelmingly prove that the cheat percentage, right, the margin of capable cheating that's out there isn't going to make a difference, then things change. But unfortunately, people on the right are very skeptical of government, right? And so they don't believe in a lot of the things government is involved with. And that's actually one of the biggest issues when it comes to trying to get the people on the right elected. So, sorry, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Now, why would they be so desperate to do such a thing? I mean, it's very clear. But one thing you can even just say, we can reference the Joe Rogan interview that just happened. I listened to it. It was actually really revealing and quite interesting. It was 3 hours long. And you don't have to like Trump to just get something out of it. Even if you don't like him, I would suggest you watching it, because it might give you some insight into how he is as just a regular person, or you might like him even less after. I don't know. But it's still worth it, because we're talking about someone who might be running the country here soon, and you should probably understand what they think about certain subjects. But this episode racked up 26 million views in the first 24 hours. It has since been let's just say, censored to a degree, which I believe has been remedied since because of all the media attention that was getting. One of the biggest videos to come out on YouTube in a 24-hour period in a very long time, and it's not on the main page, and it's not being recommended to people, and it's hard to find in search. Yeah, people are going to notice. People did notice, and it does seem that YouTube might have rectified that at this point because I can search for it and find it. But what I will say is that this is why they are getting desperate, because this amount of attention that was mostly taken in a positive way is really hard for them to get over, okay? And like I said, I mean, they tried to censor it, and it didn't work because so many people noticed that they had to do something about it because it became obvious election interference at that point. So there's a lot of things going for the Trump campaign that's not happening well for the Harris campaign, but Trump can't make himself president overnight. Kamala Harris literally can. So this is something that you should be considering as a possibility. And with these types of differences of the campaign performances, it shows that there's a real reason for why they might actually do something that egregious because, well, they've got to do something, right? Now, hold on. Let's reload this page because, well, it's from a technology company, right? I don't get all my news just from Fox or whatever. We try to talk to hit sources all over the place so that we get a good perspective as to what's happening. But sometimes their websites aren't quite as smooth. And in case you guys didn't notice, I did get a haircut, and luckily they had plenty of white hair dye, so they were able to just get it right back in there right away, immediately. And yeah, thank God, because without my hair dye, how would I survive SHTF, right? So let's talk about some of the blackout stuff. But one more thing about some of this political stuff, but there's a little bit of an intertwine here, okay? And I think that it's important for us to talk about this little hack that just occurred, okay? In case you didn't know, China just pulled off, or hackers from China, right? Who knows? But they just hacked Verizon, basically. Not just political figures, but political figures were involved with the hack. There's a couple things I want to bring to your attention here, okay? But let's just talk about the information first. This is actually, I need you to open up your speculation brain on this one because we're talking about 8 days till this election. This is problematic for many reasons, but let's just talk about it, okay? China hackers targeted Harris, Trump, Vance phones. Silicon technology powering business is where this is from. Like I said, not the smoothest website, but good information because it's not necessarily built in by a political bias. Okay, China-affiliated hackers infiltrated Verizon's telephone network and targeted prominent U.S. political figures, including Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance, the New York Times reported, citing unnamed sources. The hacks appear to be part of a wide-ranging intelligence-gathering campaign waged by a hacking group affiliated with the Chinese government that U.S. investigators have called Salt Typhoon. The group was responsible for the hacks mentioned in the Times report. Authorities say the same group also carried out attacks on a number of U.S. broadband providers, including AT&T and Verizon, potentially accessing information from systems the federal government uses for court-authorized network wiretapping requests, the Wall Street Journal reported this month. The Trump campaign team was made aware last week that Trump and Vance were among a number of people inside and outside of government whose phone numbers were targeted through the Verizon phone network hack, the Times reported, citing unnamed officials. The report and others said staff members of Kamala Harris's campaign were also targeted. Security officials discovered earlier this year that China-linked hackers had penetrated U.S. telecoms firms, but only recently determined that specific numbers have been targeted, the Times report said. Now, go down here really quick. I want you to really think now while we go through this about what could be some of the true intentions of this hack. I have two theories about what this could be used for. And I will tell you them here in a second, but now that you know there's two, maybe you can jump ahead of me on this, okay? A Trump campaign spokesman criticized the White House and Harris and blamed them for allowing the hack to take place. Think about that statement really quick. allowing the hack to take place. Verizon said it was aware that a highly sophisticated nation-state actor has reportedly targeted several U.S. telecommunications providers to gather intelligence, and that it was working with law enforcement on the investigation and to remediate any ongoing problems. In August, the Trump campaign acknowledged it has been hacked by Iranian government-linked attackers in an incident that recalled a similar hacking campaign by Russia against a Democratic organization believed to have had a critical influence on the 2016 elections. Okay. Now, why did I bring this up and why did I point out the allowing the hack to take place? Okay. First off, one thing that this could be used for, this is China or a China affiliate, right? The people who are involved with China right now are the people who are running for president on the Democrat side and the people who are in the White House currently. Tim Walz was in China for like most of his life, apparently, right? Even when he lied about it. So these people are fine with China and work closely with China, let's be honest, all right? But don't forget that the Bill Clinton administration was who gave China all of our satellite technology. So we know who likes China here, okay? Now, why would they allow it to happen? I don't have proof of that, neither does the Trump campaign. But this is a consideration for you to think about. If they could get information from the cell phones of Trump and Vance and anybody else involved in the campaign and find any damaging information, well, you would assume China would hold it for ransom because it'd be quite valuable. But the other thing is that if it was authorized or at least incentivized by those who are on the opposite team, there's a good chance they could be trying to get them to release information that's damaging to the Trump campaign in this last week before voting. And so that's something you should expect. The possibility of text messages or communications being leaked online between certain campaign affiliates. Now, the other reason, and like I said, they allowed this to happen. And don't forget, well, Kamala Harris's phone was also implicated. Yes, but that was something that would have to have had happen if they want to have no liability or no attachment to this information being leaked, right? Oh, well, ours was hacked too. Clearly, they didn't find anything on ours because, right, they would have leaked that too, but they didn't. So therefore, you're the ones who have bad things. Like, this is very obvious to me as being something that could be used, even if China wasn't behind it, but is being blamed for it. There's a lot that could happen here, okay? Now, the other reason why this could be happening or what they're going to use this information for. China could be behind it for sure. I'm not trying to say they're not. What I'm trying to say is that there's a couple of reasons why this might be happening right now. But the other thing could be blackmail in general, and not blackmail for ransom, not blackmail for money or anything along those lines. Political blackmail so that China can have as much influence within our government as humanly possible. And if they can get dirty laundry on all of these people, it's not hard for them to influence things when it comes to trying to better themselves. We do know that Trump is talking about tariffs, crazy tariffs. We know Trump is not going to be friendly to China when it comes to trade and everything else like that. There is a chance that this is why they're doing this, in order to try to have leverage for when those negotiations begin. So these are all possibilities, right? I said a lot could happen. Anything can happen. That's what's happening right now. But you should be aware of this, and you should be also considering the blackmail thing as being a real issue, because we don't forget, and this is just a side note, but a one that's kind of worth talking about real quick, that the whole P. Diddy thing is still going on. And that I honestly believe a lot of the evidence involving this criminal investigation and everything else is being withheld purposely based on the fact that we're about to have an election. And you gotta, I 100%, I don't care. I don't have any proof of this, and I don't care. I would 100% bet money that people in our government are going to be implicated in this whole situation unless it becomes a corrupt investigation, or, I don't know, he doesn't make it to court or to trial. Authorities launch interagency operation at federal jail in New York housing Sean Diddy Combs. What? Investigators from multiple federal agencies launched an interagency operation on Monday at the troubled New York City jail where Sean Diddy Combs is being held. The investigators from the Bureau of Prisons, the Justice Department's Inspector General's office, and other law enforcement agencies descended on the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the Bureau of Prisons said in a statement to the Associated Press. The law enforcement operation was designed to achieve our shared goal of maintaining a safe environment for both our employees and the incarcerated individuals housed at MDC Brooklyn. Why are they doing that now? That has always been a dangerous jail. Well, Diddy's lawyers are saying that he needs to get out of there. It's too dangerous, all these things. He's in there for a specific reason. And now the investigators have shown up. What does that do? Well, it gives you a couple things. One, loss of liability if something happens. Well, we went in there to try to make sure it was safe and something still happened. We did our best, right? Two, they set up the whole thing now. Everybody's inside. They said, we got to get rid of this guy. We're going to set things up in a certain manner, talk to the people who work in the prison, get a hold of the staff. And guess what? Oh, an accident happened. Guy's gone now, right? Oh, what happened? Well, he hung himself with a sheet. That doesn't happen ever in prisons when people are being watched, right? And not to mention, this guy clearly has dirt on all the worst people. And there's still a chance, and I'm not saying that this is the most likely, but there is a chance that people within these agencies and people within a certain compartment of the government actually want to protect him because they want to see these people get put away or get their just desserts. And they actually did go in there specifically to make sure that he could not be eliminated while in that jail. So those are the different reasons for why that's probably happening right now. There's only a few ways that goes, in my opinion, right? Nothing is a coincidence anymore, especially this close to the election. And a black swan event that could hurt people right now would be being involved with that whole scenario, right? So I mean, it's highly possible that good guys are in there trying to protect that person in order to get those indictments later on that they need to get rid of some of these awful people. But I personally would assume there's more of a chance that they are setting the stage to eliminate this person. Either way, here we are. So, I need my coffee. My voice is still hoarse. I think China got me. Okay, I've been sick. Well, I was sick for like 2 weeks straight, and now I'm still like dealing with the residuals of it. And I'm not 100%. I worked out today. I could only run a mile. Usually I can run 3 to 5, depending on the day. And yeah, I'm not happy about it. But you know what? I'm still going strong. We got to do this. So, looks like there's a lot of great people here in the chat talking about some good stuff. Okay, let's go for it. What else should we be concerned about? You know that whole talk about a blackout, right? There are some things I want to touch on that because we are in a dangerous time, okay? Now, a report recently came out from the Colorado Information Analysis Center. Now, I'm going to put this link in the chat, but I'm going to read to you the part that's kind of imperative right now. And then I highly suggest you go take a look at this, okay? Because it's very interesting. So I'm going to put this in the chat. Here we go. Savage Lee, I sound hoarse, of course. Well, thanks for noticing. Okay, this is an interesting report. It just came out, okay? Now listen to this. I'm going to go down here to page 7. We're going to talk about insider threats. And then there's another threat we're going to talk about that comes before it, but this is more important to talk about right now, okay? Insider threats. Insider threats will likely be an issue for election bodies throughout the country as they could derail or jeopardize a fair and transparent election process. Due to the nature of the United States' elections process, many people are involved in administering or carrying out responsibilities that support elections, all of whom have a potential to be an insider threat. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, an insider threat is a threat that an insider will use his or her authorized access, wittingly or unwittingly, to do harm to an entity. According to a report released by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, and the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, individuals at risk of becoming insider threats often exhibit warning signs or indicators. The following list is not all-inclusive, but contains potential flags that election officials should be alert to and seek further review by authorities. Attempting to alter or destroy ballots, mail-in ballot envelopes, administrative documents, or allowing others to access these materials without prior approval. Without need or authorization, accessing systems, equipment, and/or facilities they have no need to access or providing unauthorized personnel access. turning off security cameras or access control systems, or disregarding two-person rule requirements. Without need or authorization, taking proprietary or other materials home via documents, thumb drives, computer disks, or email. Unnecessarily copying material, especially if it's proprietary or sensitive. Remotely accessing the computer network at odd or unexpected times, atypical for normal operations. Disregarding agency computer policies, uninstalling personal software or hardware, accessing restricted websites, conducting unauthorized searches, or downloading confidential information, intimidating or threatening other staff. Those are all concerns that law enforcement agencies have about election workers doing during this process. That's a lot of concerns and a lot of vulnerabilities. And we are just letting volunteers basically run amok and do all of this from the goodwill of their heart, and just hoping they're not going to do these things, and hoping that if they do these things, that they get reported to be reviewed, right? So this report came out October 10th, and it was published today, all right? So this is a real threat that they're concerned about. And I don't see any way that you actually overcome this threat, especially from people who are incentivized to be this threat. And when I say that, I don't mean politically incentivized. I mean monetarily incentivized by people who want them to disrupt the election on purpose, okay? We've seen what's going on in Portland, Oregon, as well as I think Seattle, Washington, where they're literally starting to firebomb mail ballots now, or ballot drop boxes. So this is a concern, 100%. Now, don't forget, this is also a concern that I hadn't considered, but it is a real concern, and it's something you should think about when you go out to vote on Tuesday, if that's what you're going to be doing. Not tomorrow, next Tuesday, okay? Swatting. Swatting incidents could be used to disrupt election operations as a way of furthering the accelerationist agenda of ideologically motivated groups. Although recent election-related swatting incidents have targeted the homes of elections officials, swatting calls may expand to polling places with the intent to cause election day disruptions. That's wild. Just so you know, in some states, it's not illegal to conceal carry when you go to vote. In some states, it is illegal. So make sure you check what's legal or not in your state before you go toting a gun around while you're going to vote. But could you imagine if you and your poll station gets swatted while you're there and you're carrying, right? I'm not saying that you're going to be open carrying, but just the fact that you have a firearm on you and the SWAT team shows up could cause quite a disruption for you and everyone else around you. So just be aware that this is a legitimate threat they're concerned about. Okay? Now, this report has all kinds of stuff in it. Okay? All types of stuff. Go in, read it. It's very interesting. I mean, it talks about the assassination attempts. It talks about threats. It talks about people who are under arrest for, threatening to create disruptions. It's a very detailed report. Once again, I'll post it in the live chat again. So you have it in case you're new to the chat right now. It's very eye-opening, and it does show you that these are real concerns that they are concerned about happening on Election Day. And I am also concerned. Now, here is something to remind you about the possibility of blackouts. Blackouts can come in many forms nowadays, right? An internet blackout, that's a problem. But maybe it's a different type of blackout, a service disruption versus being a complete grid down scenario. There's a lot of different ways this could go, okay? One of the ways is, something that I think you should be aware of, okay? And it's old news, but it's something I want you to consider, okay? Back in 2020, Wired put out an article stating that social media should go dark on the week of the election. Tomorrow is the week of the election, okay? This is a well-considered opinion by many people, not myself, but a lot of people would actually praise this action. On the week of the election, social media must go dark. CEOs should voluntarily shut down their platforms to help stanch the spread of misinformation and protect democracy. America has given social media giants ample time to figure out how to stop their platforms from being used to sow political discord. Yet we find ourselves stuck in an even more precarious situation than 2016. Not only is the possibility of a stolen election real, democracy itself is vulnerable to a potential heist. Isn't that a wild thing to read that happened right before the 2020 election? No meaningful laws have improved the landscape. Instead, it's up to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitter, 2020, and others to show a rare sense of self-awareness and take a few days off, not as an admission of failure, but to reduce the odds of enabling harm. Social media outlets should voluntarily go silent for a few days before and after the election. A few days of silence would prevent many online attempts at election interference and would hinder President Trump's effort to build a preemptive narrative. For example, portraying a potential blue shift as mail-in ballots are counted as fraudulent. This is a very prophetic article, isn't it? Considering it came out in October of 2020. Not only do a majority of both Democrats and Republicans support the idea of social media platforms going offline for the week of the election, there are analogous examples across the world. By law, the French observe a period of no electoral press coverage starting 44 hours before an election. In the UK, TV and radio stations are prohibited from covering the election when the polls are open between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. on election day. In many countries, there's a blackout period ranging from 1 to over 10 days before an election in which opinion polls may not be publicly released. Funny enough, this is America where we have the First Amendment, so you don't get to do that. But also, this is a bad idea. Social media is one of the primary forms of communication for people who don't know each other personally, right? You don't have my phone number, most likely. I mean, a couple of you might, honestly. But in general, you don't have my phone number. We don't text message, right? But we discuss things here on this live stream. We need social media to keep things moving forward when it comes to pointing out inconsistencies with events happening around the election. That is a form of draconian censorship that they're trying to promote back in 2020. So a blackout doesn't need to shut the power down. It could, and that is still a vulnerability. China just hacked the phone numbers of both primary candidates' campaigns, right? They also have hacked our infrastructure. And if one of the campaigns is working with China, who knows what they'd be willing to do. But more than a actual total grid down scenario, consider social media going offline, either by design, voluntarily, or through some sort of cyber attack. But if platforms like X, YouTube, and a few others where we can get a generally good message out disappear right around the election, how will people broadcast any of the problems happening because of it, right? So I would consider that to be a possibility. And clearly, 4 years ago, people were advocating for just that. Not to mention all the other stuff they talked about regarding pre-2020 election things that they thought were ridiculous. So this is definitely a concern. Now, there is also this concern. Now, this article is actually from earlier this year, okay, from March of this year, but it's still very relevant right now. The Hill, more than inconvenient, preparing for a cellular outage on election day. Without Waze last month, many Americans were unable to navigate beyond their driveways. Without the Starbucks application, many interacted with their baristas face-to-face for the first time in years, right? Blah, 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 blah. The widespread cellular service outage on February 22nd inconvenienced millions of AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon customers across the country. Remember when that happened? It doesn't only have to happen one time, okay? Weather caused by nation-state actors, such as China's Volt Typhoon, not Salt Typhoon, which is the other one that just attacked all those other cell phones, right? Or human error, or an act of nature. The direct and radiating effects of the outage were a stark reminder of the dependency most Americans have on cellular infrastructure, okay? Now, talk about that day and how everything happened that day, all right? Here's where it comes into being a little bit more interesting. It is difficult to forecast all the effects mass cellular service outage would have on a U.S. election, but it is an exercise that the government officials and voters should undertake immediately. Regarding local and personal effects, many voters might not be able to find their polling places. rides for elderly and infirm voters would be more difficult to organize, and communications between election workers, law enforcement, and other government officials might not be coordinated in time to handle problems or report results as expected. Regarding national and international effects, a cellular network outage on election day may have far greater impact. In addition to the challenges of a close or contested presidential election, much hangs in the balance in congressional races. A cellular network outage impacting only left or right-leaning districts in a few metropolitan areas may be enough to shift the majorities in both chambers of Congress. This would significantly impact social programs, military spending, and immigration policies, driving a wedge in an already fragile and partisan system. I mean, they just got a lot of political bias there in that last sentence, but you see what it is they're trying to let you know about here is just how much damage could be done by a cellular disruption during the election. Among the potential outcomes of an outage on election day, political parties could be expected to accuse their opponents of manufacturing the event or colluding with an adversary, especially if outages arise in geographic areas favoring one party. Losing candidates would likely claim, with or without justification, that they would have won, but for the outage. These accusations may have become routine in recent elections, but an election day outage might give the accusations greater plausibility, if not accuracy. Now, that's a part that's very interesting. Telegraphing that if they were to do this, right, to suppress a portion of the country, to then say that, well, the losing team's going to say they lost because of this, is very interesting, because telegraphing that is a very poignant play, so that they can go back and say, see, we told you this would happen. We knew exactly what they would say if something like this happened. Okay, so this is the other blackout you should be concerned about, because the phones have already been compromised. China just did it again to the political candidates and their campaign teams and people outside of the campaigns. And this happened back in February. If you don't remember, it was a big deal. So I would say that a social media or a cellular disruption is probably two of the most likely blackout style events that we could anticipate here in the next 8 days. Is it possible that the grid goes down as a whole? Sure. I don't see it being as likely, though. I don't see that being as plausible. These things are more likely because there's precedent of things like this happening in the past, right? So let's talk about you guys here in the chat for a second. Ripco readiness. I will get some out, my friend. Been having a bumpy road recently. Hey, that's okay, man. Everyone's all over the place, and I'm sorry you lost your catalytic converter. Kevin Ramsey, good to see you as well. MB, CB is great, but you're going to get a lot of yahoos jamming up channels when you need it in an emergency. Ham is the way to go. Yes, comms are very important, as we have learned from Hurricane Helene. And obviously, CB radio is something that's more accessible than ham radio, but ham radio is still accessible if you're willing to jump through the hoops. Learning it is something. But there are programs online. And honestly, I even affiliate with one that I haven't even completed the course at, because I'm just been really slow about it. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Okay. Now, David Baise thinks I need a silver dangling earring. I'm working on that. I want to have my Lost Boys arc begin soon, because if I can get more hair metal, I feel like people will respect me more. Okay. Although I will say I definitely do have the legs for tight leather pants, so maybe I'm missing out on something there. Moving on. Also, war. By the way, war could break out at any minute. I expected this war to go much more hot than it has before the election. So the next 8 days for me is like, hey, man, these 8 days, a lot could happen or nothing. And it makes me feel weird, right? Look at this ad up here. I don't know where this stuff comes from. This looks like Temu crap. Make lying wrong again. Yeah, so nice. What a great hat. Okay, Reuters. They're the worst with this stuff. This is from today. Iran says it will use all available tools to respond to Israel's attack. At first, everyone thought, well, Israel didn't really do anything. So Iran might not respond because they don't want to escalate. Iran saying, nah, we're going to respond. This thing is getting out of control. Dubai, October 28th, Reuters. Tehran will use all available tools to respond to Israel's weekend attack on military targets in Iran. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghi, we're going to go with that one, said on Monday. Iran previously played down Israel's air attack on Saturday, saying it caused only limited damage, while U.S. President Joe Biden called for a halt to escalation that has raised fears of an all-out conflagration in the Middle East. Speaking at a weekly televised news conference, Baghi said Iran will use all available tools to deliver a definite and effective response to the Zionist regime. The nature of Iran's response depends on the nature of the Israeli attack, Baghi added, without elaborating. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said on Sunday that Iranian officials should determine how best to demonstrate Iran's power to Israel, adding that the Israeli attack should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated. They're going into it again. Okay, they're going to talk about the attack. If you guys didn't notice or see all that, Israel launched a big airstrike in Iran, targeting a lot of military targets near Tehran, as well as like their old nuclear facility and some other places. Supposedly the damage wasn't a lot, but it was still an attack, and it was still quite a large attack. Now, Iran is saying they're going to respond. So when is that going to happen? I don't know. And honestly, if you watch certain YouTube channels, they're going to have imminent news coverage of it for the next week and a half, and maybe one day or night you'll actually catch it live. But until then, it'll look like it's happening for the next however long. So be aware of that. But we need those people still, because they're covering stuff that I don't have the time or effort to cover, in the sense of being like all the time. So now, Israel is taking this very seriously, and this should tell you something. Two things, actually. One, Israel is in full-blown war. And two, this is what war looks like if it happens to us as well. Cabinet meeting moved to secure underground location in wake of drone attack on PM's home. The cabinet met Monday in an underground secure location in Jerusalem's governmental complex and not at the prime minister's office due to security concerns at the recommendation of the Shin Bet. The decision was made due to an increase in threats against senior Israeli officials and in light of last week's Hezbollah drone attack on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home. I got caught up on that one. Still got the Gina going on. Government sources told news outlets that the move would not be a one-time event, and that cabinet meetings are expected to be held in changing locations for the near future due to the same security concerns, and for the fear, obviously. Ministers were notified of the decision only in the morning and were told that their advisors would not be allowed and due to the constraints of the space. Okay. These people are underground already, and they're moving to secret locations and unannounced locations to have their cabinet meetings. This is full-blown wartime activity. Not to mention, I want you to look at this, and I want you to consider that if something weird happens here in the United States that has the tones of wartime effects, that you could assume that people within certain branches will be in underground bunkers going to undisclosed locations and having their meetings in places that no one will be able to find them at. Be aware of that, okay? This is not, this is SOP at this point, right? So, I'm bringing this up because the world is in a wartime environment. Israel is in the heat of it right this second. Obviously, Ukraine is as well. And these countries are a glimpse into the future if things get worse here, unfortunately. Coltrane, I 100% applaud everyone talking about pizza, because you know what? We still have to enjoy ourselves here, and we still have to enjoy the food we can get while we can get it, right? So it's all good. Don't worry about it. But what I will say is that I am actually pissed off that pizza, one of the greatest foods ever invented, has been compromised and dragged through the mud by the people who do the worst possible things here in this country because of its association with child trafficking. It really pisses me off. I can't keep losing things that I like and appreciate to all these obscurities just because they decide they're going to use something that we love and care about to be a symbol of what they do, right? So If you need one reason to get rid of all those people, which I highly recommend, then I would say that's another good reason. But I don't think it's the best reason. I think we all know what the best reason is. Sorry, but it really makes me mad. My daughter made me a pizza keychain, which I actually keep right here. Hold on. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay. It's fun, right? She did a good job on it. I love it. I hate that it's associated with certain symbology used by awful people who don't deserve to live on this planet. So, let's take pizza back. Now, I'm actually serious about this. I'm pissed off about it. I'm still pissed off about the rainbow. Okay? It's for everybody. Anyway, moving on. We are in this war, by the way. I thought you should know. Why? Because Israel wouldn't have done that if we didn't let them. And I don't mean just let them. I mean, we created an environment where they were capable of doing it. We're in the war. This is it. I'm telling you, but it hasn't started yet to the full degree that I anticipated. THAAD deployment paved way for Israeli retaliatory airstrikes on Iran. Just days after the U.S. bolstered Israeli air defenses by deploying a terminal high-altitude area defense battery and 100 soldiers, Israel on Saturday carried out a large retaliatory strike on Iran. An estimated 100 Israeli aircraft participated in the hours-long operation over Iran's night skies. The Israeli military stated that it had conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats. Military sites in Tehran, in the heart of Iranian territory, were among those struck. This was a game changer, a transition from the shadow war to a new level of the game, which is now out in the open. Sharon Ashir-Zablavsky, an expert on public policy and national security at the Devora Forum, told the Media Line, Israel demonstrated the ability to attack several sites simultaneously, showing it has precise intelligence. Okay, now, Israel now has broader aerial freedom freedom of operation in Iran, the statement continued. And this is because Danny Sertinowitz, a research fellow at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies Iran program, said that THAAD deployment signaled U.S. trust that Israel would not act against American interest. This was a meaningful strategic and operative move that was a message to both Iran and Israel. Okay? It was a fruitful American effort to coerce Israel into operating only against military targets, but also sent a message to Iran that the U.S. will back Israel, especially in defending it. So now Israel feels capable of attacking Iran because America donated the THAAD systems as well as 100 soldiers. We're in the war against Iran right now. It just doesn't quite look that way, but that's what's happening, okay? So, all right, got some good people here. People are talking about the pizza, okay? I think y'all get it. I'm mad about it, okay? I'm mad about it. Traveler 1970, you get it. All right, now, let's talk about how this war in the Eastern European theater is expanding as well. North Korea sent about 10,000 troops to Russia to fight in Ukraine, Pentagon says. We know this already. We talked about this last week and the week before. But NATO has now clarified and verified that this is true. So, North Korea sent about 10,000 troops to Russia to train and fight in Ukraine within the next several weeks, the Pentagon said Monday, in a move that Western leaders will say will intensify the almost 3-year war and jolt relations in the Indo-Pacific region. Some of the North Korean soldiers have already moved closer to Ukraine, Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh said, and were believed to be heading for the Kursk border region, where Russia has been struggling to push back a Ukrainian incursion. Earlier Monday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, NATO confirmed recent Ukrainian intelligence reports that some North Korean military units were already in the Kursk region. Adding thousands of North Korean soldiers to Europe's biggest conflict since World War II will pile more pressure on Ukraine's weary and overstretched army. It will also stoke geopolitical tensions in the Korean Peninsula and the wider Indo-Pacific region, including Japan and Australia, Western officials say. And in rebuttal to that, South Korea on October 24th said it may send Ukraine weapons after North Korea sent troops to Russia. South Korea's president vowed on Thursday to respond to North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia. including by potentially supplying offensive weapons to Ukraine. Seoul will not sit idle in the face of a North Korean provocation that threatens global security beyond the Korean Peninsula and Europe, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol told reporters in Seoul after a summit meeting with visiting Polish President Andrzej Duda. Yoon's remarks follow Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's assertion Wednesday that the United States has evidence of North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia. And now we have that verified by NATO, which means South Korea is very highly likely to send troops to Ukraine or to send weapons to Ukraine and get involved with that war as well. So, North and South Korea are getting involved with the war between Ukraine and Russia. Israel and Iran are still fighting back and forth. Israel is also in Lebanon. Israel is denying UN aid relief in Gaza at this point in time. Now, I will say, and look, this isn't to defend Israel. This is just to bring facts to the conversation, that the UNRWA was investigated and held responsible for helping Hamas during the October 7th attack. So although it's bad optically and bad humanitarianly to deny aid to people in Gaza from that organization, I also understand why you wouldn't let that organization operate in your area when they previously helped a terrorist organization attack you. So there's nuance to everything, right? It's unfortunate that we live in such a time where people want you to choose sides rather than be logical about what's actually happening. And of course, you may have to choose a side one day. I don't know. There's a possibility of that. And people will also say if you don't choose a side that you are a fence sitter who is just in the way. And that's also, that might have some validity to it. I don't know. But what I will say is that we're in a very contentious world right now, not just here in the US. Our country has the potential to spiral into something very bad. Civil war, a constitutional crisis, a million things, right? The world's already at war in the process. Iran and Israel at war, direct war, right? That we're helping Israel with. And Ukraine and Russia are at war, and we're helping Ukraine. So we're at war with these countries as well. South Korea is involved. North Korea is involved. China's involved. Everyone's already at the party. It very much feels like they're waiting to see what happens on Tuesday next week. Or it goes hot before then. So, Mike H., if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. This is true. And that's the only thing people can't take away from you is your ability to choose or decide, right? So keep that in mind. And look, I have my own opinions and I have my own biases. And that's just called being honest about yourself as a human being, right? Everyone has bias, no matter what. At the bare minimum instinctual level, you have a bias of self-preservation, right? So just keep those things in mind. But we are coming up on a very difficult time. So next week's live stream should be very interesting because it's the day before an election. And I am not going to be surprised by any crazy shit that happens between now and then. That's just the truth, right? And hopefully you've been prepping this whole time. I have been. I know many of you have been as well. It's going to help a lot if things actually get as bad as they look like they could. And if you're not prepared at all, and you're here because you want to at least know what's happening, and you're not capable of preparing in the sense of stashing supplies or creating surplus of any kind, then at the bare minimum, I urge you to learn a skill of some kind for free, right? So go on YouTube and think about a skill that might be helpful, right? How to read a map, right? How to use a tourniquet, how to set up a solar station, right? You might not be able to afford one, but what if you can at least set one up if you found or were able to come across the components? I don't know. I just want you to learn a skill of some kind so that way you don't have any preparations, but you're useful in some way, shape, or form. Or that skill might actually keep you alive, right? That's your assignment for this week. Learn a skill if you can't prepare at all. because that's still preparing. All right. Now, Tim Hewer, thank you so much for joining the membership. I appreciate it. If you want to be in the private live stream tonight, which starts at 9:15, you can go ahead and join the memberships here on the channel using the join button down below, or you can join Subscribe Star for $5 a month. There's some other perks there too. I have been behind on that though because I have been sick and it's just been really hard to get anything done. Even my videos are not as consistent as they used to be because I got to just get over this thing. But I'll put the link to Subscribe Star in the chat. If you want to join Subscribe Star, I am going to be doing an exclusive video series over there called Held for Review. And it's where we're going to go over the comments I have in my YouTube studio that are held for review. And we're going to talk about them in a private way, which is going to be very entertaining, I'm sure. So if you want to be part of that, check out Subscribe Star. If you want to just be in the private live stream, you can join the channel membership by hitting the join button down below. You'll find the links to the private live stream either on your Subscribe Star feed or on my channel page at the community tab. It'll be posted there for members. And if you don't want to do either of those, which I totally understand because it's money that not everybody has, you can at least join my Discord for free. And if you want to do that, you can go to magicprepper.com and you can find the Discord right there. But I do the private live stream as a way to say thank you to people who want to support the channel directly financially. And this is the way I came up with to try to make it worth doing. So, hey, Deborah, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate that. I really do. Listen, please do not get surprised by anything that happens this week. Anything can happen. Just when it happens, remember this conversation. Think about the things that we discussed today. Apply them to what's happening to see if maybe there was any relevance. And don't get caught off guard because, well, you already saw it coming, right? Good. All right. You guys are amazing. Enjoy the rest of your night. I hope to see you again next week. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.